Stop whatever you're doing for a moment, because what you're about to hear could directly impact how and when money arrives in your bank account, especially if you or someone you care about depends on regular direct deposits like government benefits, pensions, or tax-related payments. Right now, behind the scenes of the American financial system, something important is changing, and it's not the kind of small update that quietly slips by unnoticed. This is a major shift in how banks handle incoming deposits, and the reality is that millions of people are going to feel the effects of this change without any prior warning unless they understand what's happening in advance. Across the United States, major financial institutions, including traditional banks, credit unions, and even modern online financial platforms, have begun rolling out a new deposit verification rule. This is not just one bank making a small internal adjustment. This is a coordinated change across the financial industry, and it is happening right now. The timing makes it even more critical because it's being introduced in the middle of tax season, a time when millions of Americans are already receiving refunds, updating financial information, and relying on incoming payments. At the same time, there are ongoing changes across federal benefit programs, which means that a large number of deposits are already in motion. Put those two things together, and you have a situation where this new rule is going to intersect with real people's money in real time. Now, here's where things start to get serious. This is not a minor tweak to overdraft fees or a quiet update buried deep in terms and conditions that nobody reads. This is a fundamental change in how deposits are verified, processed, and ultimately released into your account. Specifically, it targets direct deposits, especially those coming from government sources such as retirement benefits, disability payments, veterans' benefits, and federal pensions. These types of payments are now going through a stricter, more detailed verification process before the money is made available. Before we go deeper, it's important to be clear about something. For many people, this change will happen in the background without causing any noticeable issue. If your information is perfectly consistent across all systems, if your bank account details are fully up to date, and if your identity records match exactly between your bank and the government agency sending your payments, then your deposits will likely continue arriving just as they always have. You may not even realize anything has changed. But here's the part that demands attention. A significant number of people do not have perfectly aligned records. And we're not talking about major errors or obvious mistakes. We're talking about small inconsistencies that most people would never think twice about. A missing middle initial, a maiden name versus a married name, a nickname instead of a legal name, a suffix like junior or senior appearing on one record but not another. These are the kinds of differences that have existed quietly for years without causing problems. Under the new system, those small differences can trigger something called a verification hold. To understand why this is happening now, you need to understand the problem the system is trying to solve. Over the past few years, financial fraud has evolved at a pace that has caught many institutions off guard. Criminal networks have become extremely sophisticated, and one of their most effective strategies has been targeting direct deposit payments, especially those coming from government programs. These criminals have found ways to submit fraudulent requests to change where a person's benefits are sent, effectively redirecting legitimate payments into accounts they control. The scale of this problem is enormous. We're not talking about isolated incidents. Losses from this type of fraud are measured in hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And the people most affected are often the most vulnerable, seniors and disabled individuals who depend on those payments for basic living expenses. When a payment is intercepted or redirected, the consequences are immediate and severe. The systems that banks have been using to verify deposits were designed in a very different era. At a time when fraud attempts were less complex and far less frequent, those systems were good enough. But today's reality is completely different. Fraud attempts are more advanced, more frequent, and more targeted than ever before. As a result, financial institutions have been forced to respond with stronger defenses. This new deposit verification rule is that response. Under the updated system, every incoming direct deposit goes through a more advanced identity and account matching process. Instead of relying on a single piece of information, the system now checks multiple data points at the same time. The name on the deposit must match the name on the account. The account itself must be verified as active and in good standing. The identification information linked to the deposit must align with what the bank has on file. Even the payment amount and the source of the deposit are analyzed to see if they match the account's history. When everything lines up perfectly, the process is seamless. The deposit goes through and the funds are available right on time. But if even one element does not match within the required parameters, the system flags the deposit for further review, and this is where delays can begin. For someone on the receiving end, a verification hold can be confusing and stressful. You might log into your account expecting to see your deposit, only to find that it's not there. In some cases, the bank may show a pending transaction with a note indicating a hold. In other cases, there may be no visible sign at all, just an absence of funds where you expected them to be. This uncertainty can be especially difficult for someone who relies on that payment to cover essential expenses like rent, food, or medication. If the bank is able to resolve the issue internally, the hold might last anywhere from 1 to 3 business days. But if the discrepancy cannot be resolved using the bank's own records, the situation becomes more complicated. The deposit may be sent back to the original agency, which then has to reissue the payment. That process can take significantly longer, sometimes up to several weeks. For someone living on a fixed income, that kind of delay is not just inconvenient, it can be financially devastating. Now let's talk about who is most at risk under this new system. One of the most common risk factors is a mismatch in names. This happens more often than people realize. Someone may have opened their bank account years ago under one version of their name, while their government records reflect another. Even small differences can trigger a flag. Another high-risk group includes people who have recently changed banks or updated their direct deposit information. Even when those changes are made correctly, there can be a delay in synchronization between systems, which can lead to temporary issues. Joint accounts are another area of concern. If the person receiving the benefit is not the primary account holder, the system may apply additional scrutiny. This is because joint accounts have been frequently used in fraudulent schemes. As a result, deposits going into these accounts are more likely to be flagged for review. There is also growing concern around newer online banking platforms. While many of these services offer convenience and modern features, some are still in the process of fully implementing the new verification protocols. This can create additional risk for users who rely on these platforms for receiving important payments. So, what can you actually do about all of this? The good news is that there are steps you can take right now to reduce your risk. The most important thing is to make sure that your information is consistent everywhere it needs to be. That means checking how your name appears on your bank account and comparing it carefully to how it appears in your government records. Every detail matters, even something as small as a missing initial or a slight spelling difference. It's also important to communicate directly with your bank. Ask them to confirm that your account information is fully aligned with the new verification standards. Find out if there are any flags or issues that could affect your deposits. If you're using a joint account, consider whether making the benefit recipient the primary account holder might reduce your risk. Timing is critical here. These checks should be done before your next payment is scheduled to arrive. Waiting until there is a problem can lead to delays that are much harder to resolve. And there is one more thing you absolutely need to be aware of. Whenever a new system like this is introduced, scammers move quickly to take advantage of the confusion. You may receive calls, emails, or messages claiming that your deposit has been flagged and that you need to provide information or pay a fee to fix it. These are scams. No legitimate bank or government agency will contact you out of the blue to ask for sensitive information or charge you to access your own money. At the end of the day, this new rule is being introduced for a reason. It is designed to protect people from a very real and growing threat. but like many protective measures, it comes with side effects that can impact everyday users. The key difference between those who experience problems and those who don't will come down to awareness and preparation. If you understand what's changing, if you take the time to verify your information, and if you act before an issue arises, you can avoid the disruptions that many others may face. This is one of those moments where a small amount of effort now can prevent a much bigger problem later. So take this seriously. Check your details, talk to your bank, and make sure everything is aligned before your next deposit hits. Because in a system that is becoming stricter and more automated, even the smallest mismatch can make the difference between getting your money on time and waiting days or even weeks to access what is rightfully yours. Stay informed, stay alert, and most importantly, stay one step ahead.